I froze the moment my grandmother, Margot Sinclair, glanced at me across the room. Her mansion glittered with every imaginable luxury: crystal chandeliers, golden ornaments, and tables so lavishly set they looked like museum displays. I adjusted my dress nervously, feeling suddenly small in my own skin. "Still living in the house I bought you?" she asked, her voice casual, but sharp, cutting through the chatter like a knife. I felt my stomach drop. My modest home, the place I had made my own, where I had worked tirelessly to create a life I was proud of, was suddenly a joke. I could feel the heat rising in my face as all eyes subtly turned toward me. Cousins, aunts, uncles, family, friends. I forced myself to sit up straight, but the sting of humiliation dug in deep. Blake, my cousin and Margot's golden boy, smirked from across the table. "Guess some of us don't need five-star everything, huh?" His voice was light, teasing, but I could hear the superiority behind it. Blake had always been the favorite. No matter what he did, Margot adored him, while I seemed to exist in the shadows, always second best. I took a deep breath, forcing a calm smile as I sat down opposite my grandmother. I tried to remind myself that I had built my life on my own terms. My home may have been smaller, but it was mine. I had earned every inch of it. And yet, sitting here, I couldn't help but feel the familiar pinch of resentment and hurt, memories of years spent trying to earn approval from a woman who never seemed satisfied. Dinner went on, filled with laughter and chatter that felt distant, almost unreal to me. Each comment, each glance from Margot or Blake, felt like a small jab, and I kept reminding myself not to react, not to let them see how much it hurt. I had come here proud, independent, and yet their world seemed determined to make me feel small. By the time dessert arrived, I had regained my composure, my face a mask of calm, though inside, a fire was growing. I silently vowed that I would never let anyone look down on me again. Not Margot, not Blake, not anyone. I would prove my worth in ways they couldn't ignore. Tonight's embarrassment wouldn't break me. It would make me sharper, smarter, and stronger. As Margot raised her glass for a toast, I lifted mine with a quiet smile, almost imperceptible. Inside, I was already planning. One day, I would make her see me for who I truly was. Not the little girl living in the house she deemed modest, but a woman capable of standing on her own, commanding respect on her own terms. And when that day came, she wouldn't be able to look down on me again. When I think back to my childhood, I can still see the way my grandmother looked at Blake. Every little thing he did was perfect in her eyes. She would smile at him, laugh at his jokes, praise his schoolwork, and shower him with gifts. Me, I was barely noticed. If I tried to show my ideas or share something I was proud of, it was either ignored or dismissed. My parents loved me, of course, but they were always under Margot's shadow. They relied on her for money, for favors, for decisions they couldn't make on their own. That dependence made them defer to her in every argument, every disagreement, every plan I tried to suggest. It was frustrating. I often felt like no matter how smart or capable I was, it didn't matter. I had to watch as Blake was celebrated, and I was pushed aside. I remember trying to show my creativity and cleverness in school. I would win small competitions, help my friends solve problems, or figure out ways to earn my own little money. Sometimes I would bring these things to my parents or Margot, hoping they would be proud. But mostly they just said, "That's nice, dear," and moved on. Nothing I did seemed to count. Tonight's dinner brought all of that back. Margot's comment about my house, the way Blake smirked, it felt familiar. That sting of being overlooked, of being undervalued, returned tenfold. It wasn't just about money or a house. It was about respect, about being seen as capable, about being treated as an equal. All my life, I had been patient, quiet, careful. But there was a limit to how much I could let slide. I felt a fire inside me, a mix of anger and determination. I didn't want to compete for attention in her eyes anymore. I didn't want to live under someone else's judgment or wait for approval that would never come. I wanted my own path, my own success, my own recognition. I made a promise to myself that night, while everyone else laughed and ate and carried on. I would find a way to build my life on my terms. I would find my own wealth, my own influence, my own power. And when I did, I wouldn't need Margot's approval or anyone else's. I would make sure I was never dismissed or underestimated again. I didn't know exactly how I would do it yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to hand me my chance. I would take it myself, no matter what it took. I finally moved out of the small house I had called home for years. The apartment I found in the city was nothing like the modest place Margot had mocked. It was modern, sleek, and mine. I didn't need her approval, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The walls around me reflected who I wanted to be: independent, smart, and capable of making my own way. Once I settled in, I reached out to Logan Mercer, a friend from college. Logan was sharp, always had a knack for seeing opportunities where others didn't, and he had a calm confidence I admired. Over coffee one morning, I told him about my plan, not just to survive, but to grow, to create something that would make me strong and respected on my own terms. He listened carefully, asked smart questions, and then agreed to help me. We started small, quietly looking for ways to invest money and build assets. I learned things I never thought I could understand: stocks, small businesses, even digital ventures. Logan guided me, showing me the numbers, the risks, the strategies. It was exciting. Each decision I made felt like a step away from being overlooked and a step toward proving my worth. I wasn't doing this for Margot or Blake. I was doing it for myself, but the thought of showing them one day made the fire inside me burn brighter. As I built my portfolio, I started noticing how family gossip worked. Margot's circle talked endlessly about me, dismissing my moves because they assumed I couldn't handle big things. "Evelyn is sweet, but she's never been interested in serious business," one cousin whispered. That underestimation, which had followed me all my life, now became my advantage. They didn't see the hours I spent learning, the careful decisions I made, or the quiet patience I had developed. Every overlooked opportunity one took was a step closer to the life I wanted, and to showing them they had judged me wrong. Months went by, and my hard work began to pay off. I acquired my first major asset, a small, profitable property in the city. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and it sent a subtle message without me saying a word. I had done it. I had taken control of my future, built something of value, and done it quietly while everyone assumed I was still the same person they had always underestimated. I smiled to myself one evening as I looked at the property documents on my desk. It wasn't just about money. It was about independence, respect, and proof that I could stand on my own. Margot might never know the full story yet, but I knew this was just the beginning. Each step I took from here on would be calculated, deliberate, and powerful. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in charge, and I was ready to take the next step. I started attending charity events and gatherings I never thought I would. These were the same places Margot loved: glittering rooms, expensive gowns, and people who measured everything by wealth and influence. At first, I felt out of place, but I reminded myself why I was there. I wasn't just mingling. I was watching, learning, and understanding the world Margot had always controlled. I paid attention to everything. How Margot spoke to people, how she handled deals, the way she flaunted power to mask her doubts. I noticed small cracks in her perfection, little signs she didn't want anyone to see. Some of her business moves were clever, but others were risky, and she trusted the wrong people in ways that could be dangerous if exposed. Every gesture, every word, told me more about her than anyone in the family realized. Blake was no help to her. He acted as if he knew everything, flaunting confidence, bragging about minor achievements, and looking down on anyone who didn't meet his standards. But in his arrogance, he revealed cracks in Margot's control, showing that she worried about family loyalty, appearances, and financial security more than she let on. Watching him, I realized how easily her carefully built image could be shaken if approached the right way. I dug deeper and found something that made my pulse quicken. Margot's business partner, someone she trusted completely, had been hiding shady dealings. There were irregular transactions, mismanaged funds, and signs of corruption. I could see exactly how this could be used, not for me to hurt anyone recklessly, but to show Margot that the world wasn't as safe or controlled as she thought. It was an opening I hadn't had before, a crack I could exploit quietly, subtly, without anyone suspecting. I started planning how to use these discoveries. Nothing obvious, no dramatic confrontations or visible moves. I would manipulate circumstances behind the scenes, guide events carefully, and make sure Margot and Blake never suspected me. Every smile I offered, every compliment I gave was calculated. Every action in public and behind closed doors became a part of a larger plan. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to my past. I was shaping the future, quietly gaining control. Margot's arrogance, her blind spots, and the secrets around her were tools I could use. And slowly, carefully, I began setting the pieces in motion. No one saw it coming, not even her. By the time I left the next charity gala, I knew I had started something that could change everything. This was no longer just about proving myself. It was about taking charge and showing them they had underestimated me. I knew the moment had come to make my first quiet move. Blake had been bragging for weeks about a business deal he was handling on his own. He acted like he was some genius, but I had already seen the truth in public records and insider whispers. His decisions were careless, rushed, and dangerous. One wrong step, and the whole thing could fall apart. I didn't need to lie or create anything new. All I had to do was make the truth visible. So I gathered the documents, the emails, the reports he ignored, and sent them anonymously to a few business blogs and financial pages that loved exposing rich families. I didn't attach a name. I didn't leave a trace. I simply pressed send and waited. It didn't take long. By evening, the news began to spread. Headlines questioned Blake's choices, calling them irresponsible and unprofessional. Comments flooded in, mocking him for pretending to be more capable than he was. The scandal wasn't huge, but it was loud enough to embarrass him and shake Margot's perfect image. When I saw the story, my heart beat fast. Part of me felt satisfied. All my life, Blake had gotten away with everything because Margot covered for him. Now, he finally had to face the consequences of his own actions. But another part of me felt a small sting of guilt. I wasn't used to hurting people, even ones who had treated me poorly. Still, I reminded myself that I wasn't doing this out of pure anger. I was doing it because they had pushed me into a corner for years. I was taking control for once. Margot's reaction came quickly. She was furious, calling meetings, shouting orders, trying to find out who had leaked the information. She questioned people close to Blake, then people in her company, and even distant relatives. I kept my face calm whenever I heard the news, pretending to be just as surprised as everyone else. Inside, I stayed still and quiet, knowing she had no way to trace it back to me. Blake, meanwhile, looked shaken. He wasn't used to being criticized. He kept trying to defend himself, but every excuse made him look worse. Margot stopped praising him at family gatherings. She spoke to him with a sharp tone, correcting him in front of others. For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes, doubt about the grandson she had always trusted more than anyone. Small cracks formed in their perfect bond, cracks that had never existed before. Watching it all unfold gave me a strange mix of emotions. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. But I felt stronger, more in control than I ever had. At the same time, I knew I had stepped onto a dangerous path. If anyone discovered what I had done, everything could fall apart. Still, as I lay down that night, I felt something new growing inside me. Confidence. I had made my first move, and no one suspected a thing. But with every step forward, the risk was getting higher. I would have to be smarter, quieter, and even more careful from here on. And I was ready. I decided my next move needed to be smarter, not louder. That was when I approached Charles Whitford, a well-known business rival of Margot. He had competed with her for years in quiet, strategic ways. Most people avoided picking sides between them, but I walked up to him at a charity auction and started a simple conversation. To my surprise, he already knew who I was. Charles was sharp, calm, and observant. As we talked more over the next few events, he began sharing things about Margot, her habits, her fears, her mistakes, without even realizing how valuable the information was to me. I didn't ask directly. I simply listened, nodded, and let him talk. Every detail he gave me helped me understand how to move forward. It felt strange, becoming close to someone who had fought my grandmother for years, but I reminded myself that Margot had never protected me the way she protected others. Using that new knowledge, I began planting small seeds of doubt between Margot and Blake. Nothing dramatic. Just light comments, subtle reactions, and carefully timed questions. If Margot bragged about Blake, I gently mentioned something that made her second-guess him. If Blake complained about her, I encouraged him to talk things out, knowing he would only make things worse. Little by little, they started watching each other more closely. Meanwhile, people in Margot's social circle began noticing me. I wasn't loud or flashy, but I carried myself with confidence, and that made some people curious, and others jealous. A few women looked at me with narrowed eyes, wondering how I suddenly appeared at events they had attended for years. Some whispered about my connections. Others tried to test me with rude questions. I didn't let it bother me. Their envy only showed that I was finally stepping into a world where my presence mattered. But living two lives wasn't easy. By day, I worked on building my independence. By night, I navigated parties, business gatherings, and conversations filled with hidden intentions. I had to smile even when I was tired, act calm even when my nerves were tight, and stay focused even when I wanted to walk away. A few friends noticed I was changing. They said I seemed distant or distracted. I couldn't explain the truth, so I just told them I was busy. As I got deeper into these games, I sensed a shift in Margot. She started becoming suspicious. Her eyes scanned rooms differently. She paused longer in conversations, as if trying to read the truth behind people's words. She even asked Blake if he felt someone was trying to interfere with the family. She didn't know who to blame, but she knew something was wrong. I could feel her attention slowly turning toward the shadows, and I was standing right there, quiet and unseen, pulling the strings without leaving a trace. I had been planning carefully for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to act. Blake was preparing for a major presentation at a charity gala, boasting about how everything would impress everyone, especially Margot. I knew exactly how to use that overconfidence against him without anyone suspecting me. On the night of the event, I quietly nudged things in the right direction. A few misplaced files, a last-minute change in the guest list, subtle hints about Blake's numbers being off. It all looked like simple mistakes to anyone watching. When Blake stepped on stage, ready to show off, the errors became obvious. His slides didn't match his speech, and a few key donors noticed inconsistencies. Margot's reaction was immediate. She raised her voice, trying to correct him in front of everyone. The room stiffened, the audience whispering as she scolded him sharply. Blake's confident smile faltered, and for the first time, it was clear to everyone that he wasn't in full control. People started questioning if Margot had lost her grip, wondering aloud how such a careful family could allow such chaos. I stayed in the crowd, quiet and composed, pretending to be as shocked as everyone else. Inside, I felt a rush of satisfaction. No one knew I had orchestrated the situation. I had managed to expose Blake's weakness without revealing myself, and I could watch the family dynamic shift without interference. Later, I noticed the way people subtly glanced at me, as if they had started seeing me differently. Some admired my calm confidence, even though they didn't know the full story. I felt a quiet thrill, knowing I was gaining influence without stepping into the spotlight. It was a strange feeling, powerful and dangerous, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction. Margot, on the other hand, was tense in the days after the event. I could see her thinking deeply, replaying conversations, and examining her own decisions. For the first time, I felt she was reflecting not on Blake's mistakes alone, but on the subtler intelligence she had long ignored in me. She didn't know the source of the disruption, but she was starting to consider that someone she had dismissed could be cleverer than she realized. That night, I went home feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: confidence. The scales had shifted. I had proven I could act without fear, without anyone suspecting me, and the family's hierarchy had started to wobble. I realized, for the first time, that I could confront Margot if I wanted to, without worrying about immediate retribution. I knew the day was coming when I would face her directly. And this time, I would do it on my terms. I spent weeks preparing for the night I knew would change everything. My apartment was decorated for Christmas, warm lights casting a soft glow over the room, the table set perfectly. I wasn't trying to impress anyone with wealth or extravagance, but I wanted Margot to see that this was my home, my space, a place I had built on my own. When she arrived, I greeted her calmly. She looked around, her eyes widening slightly at the modern design and thoughtful touches. I could see the surprise in her expression, the realization that I had created something impressive without her help. I poured us both a glass of wine and motioned to the table. I wanted us to have a private dinner, I said, keeping my tone steady. Just the two of us. Margot sat down, still scanning the apartment, clearly unsure how to react. I waited until we were settled, then began. I told her about my moves over the past months. Not every detail, but enough to show how I had grown and how I had used her underestimation as motivation. I spoke calmly, almost gently, explaining how I had acquired assets, learned business strategies, and subtly influenced events in her world without anyone knowing it was me. Her face changed as I spoke. First, there was disbelief, then shock, and finally a flicker of recognition. She had never seen this side of me before, smart, strategic, and capable. I watched as she realized she had misjudged me for years, assuming I would always be quiet, harmless, and dependent. I didn't need to raise my voice or show anger. My calmness made the point clear. I had done all of this on my own. I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with her. Respect isn't given because of a name or a family. It's earned. And I've earned mine, I said, letting the words settle between us. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of truth, something I had wanted her to understand for a long time. Margot didn't speak at first. She seemed to be processing everything, thinking back on her actions, her favoritism, the ways she had dismissed me. I could see her considering what she had missed, how her judgments had blinded her to what I was capable of. The dinner continued quietly after that, the tension still in the air, but different now. It wasn't just about power or wealth. It was about recognition, understanding, and finally equality. Margot had to decide what she would do next. Would she try to reconcile, acknowledge my independence, and accept me as I am? Or would she walk away, refusing to admit she had misjudged me all these years? As I cleared the last plates and poured another glass of wine for both of us, I realized that this confrontation was the turning point. Whatever Margot chose, I had shown her that I was no longer the person she could control or dismiss. The choice and the consequences were entirely hers. After the confrontation, things in the family shifted. At gatherings, I noticed subtle changes. Blake, who had always acted so confident, now seemed cautious around me. He tried to joke, to charm, even to show off, hoping to win back favor with me or at least regain some control. I responded carefully, never cruel but firm, letting him know I had changed and that I wouldn't be manipulated. Each clever response I gave made him hesitate, and I could see the frustration building. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Part of me was proud of what I had accomplished. I had proven I could stand on my own, navigate the family's complicated dynamics, and claim respect without anyone's approval. Yet another part of me wondered if I had crossed a line. Was this revenge fair? Was it right to manipulate events and people to teach a lesson? I didn't have easy answers, and the weight of my choices sometimes pressed heavily on my thoughts. Margot's attitude was changing too. She began to treat me differently, with a subtle respect I had never seen before. It wasn't complete admiration, she still had her sharp edges, but I could tell she was acknowledging something I had done that she hadn't expected. Perhaps she realized I was capable, clever, and independent. Maybe she even regretted having underestimated me all these years. Watching her, I felt a mix of triumph and curiosity. How much of her recognition was genuine, and how much was pride holding her back? Blake, on the other hand, was struggling. He tried multiple times to regain his position in the family, attempting small gestures of reconciliation, offering compliments, and trying to charm both Margot and me. I responded with quiet confidence, careful words, and subtle actions that reminded him I was no longer the same person he could easily dismiss. Every attempt he made only reinforced the shift in our family dynamic. I took quiet moments to reflect on my journey. I had come a long way from the girl who felt invisible in her grandmother's eyes. I had learned to be patient, strategic, and assertive. I had turned humiliation into motivation, and it had transformed me in ways I hadn't fully imagined. Yet the question lingered: what came next? Could I fully reconcile with Margot and the family, accepting some connections while keeping my independence? Or should I cut ties completely and focus entirely on my own life, free from past judgments and expectations? The tension in the family continued, subtle but noticeable. People watched me differently now, respected my presence, and even whispered about my cleverness. I realized that my next choice would shape not just my future, but the way I interacted with the family for years to come. The decision wasn't easy, but I felt ready to make it, and whatever I chose, I knew it would be on my terms. I finally closed a deal I had been working toward for months. It wasn't flashy, but it was important. A business venture that guaranteed I could support myself completely, without ever relying on Margot or anyone else in the family. For the first time, I felt truly free. Every late night, every careful decision, every quiet step I had taken had led to this moment. I could build my life on my own, and no one could take that away from me. A few days later, Margot reached out. She came to my apartment, carrying a small gift and a cautious smile. It wasn't extravagant, but it was a gesture I hadn't expected. She spoke carefully, almost formally, acknowledging the work I had done and the person I had become. For the first time, she treated me as an equal. It wasn't complete warmth, but it was respect, and that was enough. I accepted it quietly, knowing I had earned it through my own efforts. Sitting alone later, I reflected on everything that had happened. All the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated had shaped me. The humiliation I had felt wasn't wasted. It had taught me patience, strategy, and strength. The betrayal I had endured had fueled determination instead of anger. I had turned every negative moment into a lesson, a stepping stone toward independence. I felt proud, not only of what I had achieved, but of how I had done it, quietly, cleverly, and on my own terms. When I invited the family over for another Christmas dinner, the atmosphere was completely different from years past. The table was set beautifully, but this time the tension wasn't about wealth or judgment. It was about recognition. Margot arrived, carrying her usual poise, but I could see the respect in her eyes. Blake sat stiffly, unsure where he fit into this new dynamic. I felt a calm control I had never felt before. During dinner, I led the conversation, shared updates about my business, and listened as Margot and others spoke. I didn't need to boast. My confidence and quiet authority spoke louder than words. Blake's attempts to interject or dominate the conversation fell flat. Margot listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally correcting herself, clearly aware that the balance had shifted. By the end of the evening, I realized how far I had come. The roles had reversed. I was in control, Margot humbled, and Blake sidelined. I felt a deep satisfaction, not from revenge, but from having claimed my place in the family and in life. I had proven my worth, built my independence, and transformed every past hurt into strength. For the first time, I could truly say I was free, and I had done it entirely on my own.